What's up guys, Karn here. So PV2 early access is in about 3 weeks, a bit less than that, and we get an announcement, I would say, hopefully within the week. I want to talk about the things that I want from that game, especially when it comes to melee. So to preface this, I'm first gonna talk about some concept that my thoughts are based on, which focus a lot on the inherent mechanical problems that melee has always had in pretty much every game that has a distinction between melee and range gameplay. So if you're a melee character, you inherently have the disadvantage of needing to be close to the target to be able to deal damage. This means that anytime you cannot be in melee range, you cannot deal damage. Like for example, in P1, we'll take an example, everyone can relate, is when you're fighting Exarch, and there's runes on top of him, you cannot stand there because otherwise you die, so you have to wait until he comes back to you. That's a lot of uptime loss, a lot of damage loss. So overall, for the same amount of DPS, you would always prefer to play a ranged character that can deal damage from not being in melee range. In that case, for example, if you had the same DPS on a melee character and on a ranged character, you'd always choose to be a ranged character because you will never encounter that problem. Now, there's another layer to it where how you deal damage matters. For example, if you're a ranged character, you could choose between having to attack constantly to deal damage, like say you're playing a bow build, you're just shooting your bow, a tornado shot, whatever, you have to stand still and attack. Or you could have your damage delivery be proxied and not requiring you to stand still and attack or cast. Then you would always prefer the version where you do not have to do that. For example, if you play totems, brands, things like this, you just set it and it does damage and you can just run around, do whatever you want. That would always be better. So when trying to balance a game that has all these variables in play, they need to be taken into consideration for numbers to make sense. Melee has historically always had all these advantages. You have to be in melee range, you have to be constantly attacking, and all that without necessarily having better defenses than other archetypes. At least not to the extent where it would make it worth it. The one notable time it hasn't been the case is where slams were added to the game, which did fix a lot of these problems. Like you see how to be in melee range, the downtime did not impact your damage nearly as much as it did with other archetypes because your damage was tied to your exerts and your war cries. If you did not have exerts, if your seismic crowd was not up, if your intimidating crowd was not up, you were not doing any damage anyway. So all you had to make sure was to spend your exerts, and as long as your exerts were always cool enough, then you would not be losing much damage. That's what made slams very strong. Like the numbers also reflected that properly. But like when you got your hits, you would be hitting for like millions every time you hit the target, and which means that, for example, you're fighting Exarch currently, for example, and oh, there's runes popping on him. Cooldown, your war cries, sorry, are cooling down anyway, so you don't mind like stepping away for a few seconds and waiting to be able to get in range again. That and the fact that, yeah, you had bigger AoE, which meant you have a higher effective range, also helped a lot. Whereas, for example, if you took something like Bone Shatter, that is a perfect example of a melee skill. That has like all the downsides of being melee. It's like you have to be melee, like point blank. You're scaling attack speed, which means every second you do not attack, you're losing a ton of damage. And you also had to ramp your trauma to start doing damage. So you had like, this was the most mechanically the worst skill that you could possibly have for anything bossing related, for example. So that had all the mechanical disadvantages in that regard. Another thing, for example, that mechanically gives a big advantage is like whenever your damage is based off cooldowns, which is again what slams were with war cries. And also what the seismic trap was, what made it so strong is that your damage was tied to a trap that had a big cooldown, that have cooldown, so which means, you know, the way you balance this is like if it has a cooldown, it has to do more damage, obviously. And for seismic trap, for example, well, you would throw your traps, and all you have to do is like whenever your traps are up, you can just set down whenever it's ready again. That's what made seismic traps so strong, is that you just set all your traps. And then for the entirety of the time your traps are cooling down, you can just run around, do whatever, you're not really losing damage during that time, so having to do mechanics does not really hinder your damage output as much. Again, very similar to slams, which is why it was good mechanically. And the numbers also were there, you also had good defense, so yeah. That was the only one time where actually melee was the best way to play. This patch is better, obviously, since the melee rework this patch. There's still like some problems. I think there's a decent chance that will be fixed in PV2. Before I go into that, I want to talk about all these things I'm talking about uptime, damage delivery, etc, etc. It's mostly from a bossing perspective. And normally there will be more factors involved, such as how well a clear skills, because you do not want those skills with the best clear also have the most single target, because otherwise, well, that's how you would play. There would be no reason to play something else. This is where PoE2 changes come into play. Luckily, this is a balanced concern that should not exist in PoE2, since you will be able to have multiple 6 links, right? So you could have a skill that you will clear with and a skill you'll do single target with. Especially since you have the ability to weapon swap with different skills, different weapons, and different skill trees. Which means that, yeah, you're gonna have a skill and a weapon set just for clearing, and a skill, or you could have another skill with another weapon set and another completely different tree just for single target. And that is a solution that will help a lot, because currently in PoE1 it suffers from that problem a lot. There's a lot of good skills like that have extremely good clear or extremely good single target, but they're really bad for in the other contents. Like, for example, say a good current example is Molten Strike of the Zenith, which has the highest damage in the game right now, but is also one of the worst clears in the game because of how clunky it is mechanically to clear with. There's also things that obviously have the opposite side, something like, I don't know, it's not really melee, but like SST Glad, for example, that like insanely good clear, but has a terrible single target. That would be an example like that, and these problems will not really happen in PoE2, hopefully. At least that's what everything points towards to, since you will be able to just use multiple skills for different situations, just like, which is the intent exactly. So I'm expecting that every character will probably have something like that, a skill for clear, a skill for single target, and you just build around like that. Now, I've played, speaking of PoE2, I played earlier this year the LA event, which at this point is a bit outdated. I won't go too much into detail. But the big points are that gold was too scarce, right? So it was very difficult to get weapon upgrades as you progressed. The lack of mobility, the lack of the monsters stunning you this frequently, the inability to attack while moving with melee skills, which I thought was something that was supposed to be doable also on melee skills. That was actually, from my understanding, one of the big reasons to rework all the animation stuff in melee in general, was to allow that to be a thing. Some skills have built-in movement, but at least for the early game, at least on Warrior, there was very little things you could use while moving. There was only a rolling slam would allow you to move while attacking, whereas, for example, I know that both characters could move with almost every abilities they had, and that makes a huge difference in being able to deal with the trash mobs early on when your character is weak, slow, all that stuff. So going through zones on melee on Warrior was very painful. It might also have to do with that version of the game being a bit overtuned. That being said, the bosses were a lot of fun, and by far the best part, I think, from what I've played in PoE2. They're all pretty well done, had mechanics to do, etc. The Warrior toolkit at that stage was very fun and effective to use. Like, you'd set up for stuns, wait for openings, and do your big damage combo. So that was very fun and satisfying to do, and very rewarding. I really like that, and made me look forward to bosses like every single time. Like, I would go fight a boss, and then move on and progress to the next one, and I would just be like, oh, when is it? When is the next boss? I want to fight the next boss. There's been changes since, though, and they have already said that they will make gold more accessible to help with that exact problem. That I'm pretty sure everybody had the same feedback when it comes to this, to gold and weapon progression in general. So they're gonna make gold more accessible by making more gold drop, making items vendor for more at the vendor, and they also items that the vendors sell also be cheaper in gold. So that should help a decent amount with being able to keep up your weapon up to date, to not start falling off. Because especially in the game, when you start with a level 1 weapon, and when you keep that for a few zones, it's getting very painful, as you can see. So truly that should fix that problem. And it also seemed that the game was tuned down a bit, at least on the second playtest that they had in LA in June. So that's good too. I think the game was like definitely too hard the first time when I played it. I don't know how they're gonna end. I think I don't mind either way. Like, if it's at this difficulty level, as long as they fix the problems that I mentioned, like stuns, gold, to be able to upgrade your weapons, I would not mind. I don't expect it will stay like this, because otherwise people are gonna have a lot of problems. And we also got to look at some Act 3 footage from Gamescom, focusing new skills, and these skills made me very excited to play. So the first one was Hammer of the Gods, and it looks like the exact type of skill that makes perfect sense for melee in PoE2 to address the melee limitations that I talked about earlier. It has a long cooldown, does a lot of damage, which means you can combo it very well with the Exerts, War Cries. That's the type of playstyle you'd expect to want against bosses, like, dodging mechanics. Whenever you have a damage window, you drop your big combo, which, for example, here with the involved Hammer of the Gods, with Seismic Cry, etc., etc., making the most out of your limited damage timing window, which Again, like I said, if you had to do this on a skill like currently Bone Shadow, like it would be very, very bad because you get the timing window, but like you can't really do much with it with skills that scale attack speed like that. That's another problem that I'm going to talk about later. I think skills with cooldown are actually good to have, but only if they have the appropriate numbers so that their impact reflect their cooldowns. Nobody wants to use a 25-second cooldown ability that doesn't kill what's on your screen. That's not a boss, right? Like you don't want to press you hammer the gods with everything, war cries, and then you see the white pack alive. Nobody wants that. Like abilities with cooldown like that, like they add a big tactical aspect to combat, as well as, since there'll be a massive difference between using cooldown the right time and the wrong time, which is going to make it very rewarding, very satisfying when successful, and very devastating when it's not. And I think that's very good. And that was kind of how it played back when they first added slams. If you use your Seismic Cry properly, line up all your exerts properly with your Fist of War, then you would do a lot of damage, and if you didn't, then you would do, I don't know, like a fraction of the damage you'd normally do. That'll be the case here, like, not missing it, using it properly with the proper time. That'll be something that I'm looking forward to. I think it's going to be very fun to at least boss on. Like we already mentioned, for the rest of the game, you'll have the ability of different skills to deal with the situations where you don't want to spend your big cooldowns on. Now, Stampede is not a skill that would showcase, and that looked amazing. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to use. Like, Stampede, from what I've seen, at least, was a movement skill that has no cooldown and has enough damage to like just clear trash mobs. So like technically, you could probably just use that to just move around zones and like clear zones as you go. It's like as if you could just currently just leap slam around and stuff dies on your way. I'm not sure if the footage we've been shown was an over-leveled character, over-geared. I don't know, but it did look very, very strong, and I'm very, very excited to actually try that and see how it goes. Yeah, so basically to summarize, I think I would definitely want from PoE2 is that, like, skills that are good for clearing, make sure that mechanically it makes sense. For example, the skills that are expected to do single target, they either have extremely high DPS, if there's something like Bone Shadow that needs a lot of attack speed and ramps, like, skills attack speed. In that case, it needs to have like extreme amounts of damage, because like I explained, if you have to be melee and attack fast to deal damage, then you need to have obscene amounts of damage, like kind of like Mortal Striker the Zenith, honestly. And if you do not, then you would have to have something like slams. Hammer of the Gods, for example, looks perfect. Skills with cooldowns, high damage that you can empower with other abilities and combo with, and everything that has like basically damage numbers need to reflect how good or bad a skill is mechanically in terms of damage of time. Hopefully, like I said, in PoE2, it'll be a lot easier to do that properly, because they can just balance skills based on, well, what are they supposed to do. The skill could be extremely good at clearing and do absolutely no single target, and that's okay, because you can just have another skill that will do the single target for you, since now we will have a set amount of gems, that can all be 6-linked. We can have different weapons, where we can swap weapons, we can swap trees dynamically, so it will make things a lot easier to balance. And they can just say, okay, if that skill can have really good single target, but absolutely no clear whatsoever, and that's okay, and vice versa. But I think that will solve a ton of issues that PoE1 had, and they can just, that will open up a lot of things, I think, for how they will design skills in general. So I just hope that things just make sense in that regard. Mechanics, how good mechanically is a skill versus how much damage it does. Attacking while moving is something that I really want to be present on more melee skills. So far, the only one I've seen is Rolling Slam. I guess there's Stampede, for example, that we've seen, but that's a movement skill, and it also comes later. Yeah, I think these are the two big things. Obviously, yeah, the gold thing, they're fixing it. And yeah, other than that, I think we'll just wait and see. I'm very excited to try to finally get to play it like completely from on a real character, on a fresh thing, and see how the game plays out. And yeah, hopefully we get info soon, within the week, about the announcement, because the announcement is on the November 1st. This is what we've been told, so it's like a few days out, and after that we're gonna have another 2 weeks until the early access starts. I can't wait. There's gonna be, I'm probably gonna go over some of the info that we have later on, and yeah, see you guys on November 1st then. Can't wait to play some slams in PoE2. See you guys in the next one.